The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome to a very happy episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. And the new Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, because that happened. It's pretty awesome. There's a lot that happened in the Fort Lauderdale area over the past 7 days, and we're going to get into it a little bit. Hey, this is Dave, your host and author, and we're going to continue with our work on Mezcal Lauderdale, which is one of my absolute favorite events every year, as you can tell if you listen to the podcast. This episode, and actually the next episode, were recorded before the event came out, but since we are still technically in the middle of Mezcal Lauderdale week, and I did want to kind of get that information out to everybody because this is some pretty awesome stuff that you can find here in the state of Florida. And today we're going to be talking to Phil Reis. He is the Miami market manager for an importer by the name of Global Beverage Team, and the mezcal they import is called Xicala. They were at the event with 3 different expressions. Obviously, a joven, which you would assume would be blanco if you drink tequila, and the reposado and an añejo. Phenomenal spirits, and a lot of really great stories about how the production of those spirits help the community that makes Xicala. And that's one of the things that I've really noticed about mezcal is that this isn't so much an expression, pardon the pun, of the region that these spirits are produced, but also of the neighborhoods and the communities that produce them, because each community really does make their own spirit. And if you have a label, and you'll hear about this more in the next couple of episodes, not only are you having a spirit in a particular region where it was made, but you're also tasting a sort of, pardon the pun, distilled version of the people that make it. It's a really great thing to realize and to experience. But enough about me. We're going to chat with Phil. So this is Phil Reis from Global Beverage Team and Xicala Mezcal. Enjoy. So before we start talking about Xicala as a mezcal, let's talk about Xicala, the deity, correct?
Yeah, Xicala was named for the Mexican deity who roamed the land, singing of love and dreams. Xicala inspires free spirits to express their creativity and individuality. So it's a great deity to be named after, based on the creativity and uniqueness of the Mexican spirit and Mexican people.
Yeah, and there seems to be a lot of creativity with Xicala, and we'll talk about some of the aspects of it a little bit later, but with the actual spirit itself, how long has Xicala been around? And can you tell us a little bit about not only the agave that's used, but also the community that makes Xicala?
Well, Xicala is distilled in Oaxaca. And since 1920, the distillery has been producing Oaxaca's mezcals. That distillery, based on the Mexican government, they certify both tequila production and mezcal. Our mezcal has the nom O for Oaxaca, 01 being the first one registered in Oaxaca, X for Pekala. But Xicala has a nice tradition going for it. We support the community, like we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah,
and it's Cal done in some great tradition with the Mexican culture. It really celebrates the indigenous people of Mexico, and we're using 100% Espadin agave, which with the production of mezcal, you can use any combination of up to 30. But I think Espadin is the one that most mezcals are really reaching for perfection with Espadin, and we are 100% Espadin.
Awesome. And you have 3 expressions as of right now that you're releasing here in the US, correct?
Absolutely. We have the joven, which means young, which would equate to like a plata or blanco in the tequila world. So a clear spirit that is distilled and rested in stainless steel for a couple months. And then we have a reposado, which is aged 6 months in American virgin oak. And then we have a añejo, which is aged for a full year in French oak. So it gets a nice deep color from the French oak, which tends to impart a little bit more color and oakiness into the brand.
With the barrels for both the reposado and the añejo, are those sort of one and done like they are with bourbon, or can you reuse the wood a few times for a few different runs before it has to be retired?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that they're virgin oak, so they're not a whiskey barrel and they're not a bourbon barrel. I believe since they are virgin that we can reuse them. I'm not 100% sure though. I'd be misspoken if I said that we were one and done or if we use them multiple times. I do not know for sure that answer.
Awesome. If somebody were to come in for bourbon, for example, obviously they'd be interested in the American oak as well, being the virgin American oak needed for bourbon. Would you probably steer them a little bit more towards the reposado for that? Or where would you start somebody who is experienced with other spirits, but just getting into mezcal?
Well, the reason for, I guess, making a reposado and an añejo for our brand would be to start including some of those people, those whiskey drinkers, those bourbon drinkers, because they tend to lean a little bit more towards oakiness, being that those brands are aged in the barrels. The American oak would be a lot more similar to what they're used to if they're drinking American whiskeys and American bourbons. But I think that French oak imparts some great flavors as well. I think we're looking with our mezcal. A lot of people are maybe a little hesitant with the smokiness of the typical mezcal. So I think the reposado and the añejo start to lend themselves to bringing people in that have a little hesitation towards that smokiness. It's more of an intro to the whole platform, to the whole group of mezcals, and it eases them into the category to approach the more smoky jovens in the mezcal world.
And that's interesting. I would just assume that the darker the color, the heavier the smoke would be, but it seems like with Xicala, it's almost the reverse.
Yeah, that barrel aging, the oakiness kind of blends with it, if you will, and smooths it out, makes it a little bit less smoky. At least that's my impression of the brands and the aging process that we're using. I think it balances out with that smokiness. You get the oakiness, and it really plays well together. And I think they're great expressions. All 3 of them are great. Our joven is 43%, so 86 proof, where our reposado and our añejo are 40% each. So that joven has a little bit more kick than the other 2, just because of the extra couple percent in the ABV.
Gotcha. Now, if we were to go to Oaxaca, how would they take their mezcal? Would they be going straight for the joven? Do the añejos and reposados still get a fair amount of play in the home of mezcal? How would it usually be drunk?
I think in the home of mezcal, they're going to go for the traditional. They're going to go for the joven. They're going to go for the smoky, the clear spirit, if you will. I think reposado and añejo is a little bit more of innovation, and it's the way of showing their creativity and coming up with something a little bit newer and bringing the brand to more people. So I think if we were in Mexico, different than with tequila, where tequila is basically consumed in a little shot glass, with the mezcal, they're drinking it out of what they call copitas, little teeny cups that are ceramic and handmade. and tend to be a little bit wider so that you get the full aroma. You get the aroma of the smokiness, and you could catch that right up front. I think that, in Mexico, if you're a purist and you're going for that mezcal, I think the Mexicans would tell you that they would go for the Joven, be the one that they would choose first and foremost. And any type of expression that's aged or has anything else in the mix would be something that would be more that creativity side.
That's awesome. And obviously that's how the people are drinking it. But let's talk about the people that are actually doing the drinking and the distilling, because one thing that I've noticed with several mezcal labels is there's a big focus, you kind of alluded to this earlier, of giving back to the communities that are doing the growing and doing the cooking and doing the distilling.
Yeah, well, the big thing with our brand is, we give back to the community. We tie a couple things together with the production of our brand. When we are roasting our brand, we're using the wood from the copal tree, and the copal tree is pretty abundant in Oaxaca, from what I've been told. I haven't had the opportunity to be there yet. We're supposed to take a company trip there later this year. But the copal tree is a tree that's the most prominent and widely available for use of the wood. That's the wood that we use when we roast the agave for the Xicala Mezcal. Mm-hmm. And we employ some families in the area. It all started at the beginning when we were bringing smaller amounts of Xicala to the U.S. We put a alebrije, or a spirit animal, on every single bottle, and they're carved from the same wood that's being used to roast the agave. They're carved from the copal wood, and it's a spirit animal. It's basically their little sculptures or hand carvings and hand paintings that they're showing their creativity, but they're also meant to ward off the evil spirits. For the Mexicans, they're very spiritual people. And every single bottle of Xicala, whether it be Joven, Reposado, or Añejo, is adorned with an alebrije, handmade, hand-painted. Some of them look very much alike, but they're all very different because no two are exactly the same.
So this is not a mass-produced machine milled in China and then shipped over.
By no means. Truly artisan, truly an artisan product. The respect for the brand, the respect for the way it's made. We roast for 3 days in a conical oven in the ground. They cover it with the pieces of the agave that they cut off from the outer ends, the spines of the agave. They cover it with that. They cover it with earth, and they let it sit in its own roasting smoke for 3 days. So that's where that smokiness comes into mezcal. The core of the agave is absorbing all of that smoke for 3 days. And then when they macerate it, they use a concrete wheel so that they get a nice uniform maceration on the agave. And then they distill twice. The first distillation gets it to about 20 to 25% ABV. Okay. And then the second distillation gets it up to the 43 that the Joven is. And then we take the Joven and we age it accordingly for the Reposado in the American oak for 6 months, or the Añejo in French oak for a year. But the whole alebrije, that started with one lady and her daughter. This lady lives in the area by the distillery in Oaxaca. She had a very tough life. She got married at 15, had a child, and had a husband who was an alcoholic and wasn't so nice to her, if you will. And by employing her to make the alebrije, she was able to distance herself and divorce. And currently, I'm told that we employ about 25 to 30 families in the Oaxaca area immediately around the distillery to make our alebrijes.
That's amazing. So it seems like really with a bottle of Xicala, it's more of an expression of that community, both inside and out of the bottle.
Yeah, I think so. With any of the Mexican spirits, mezcal and tequila. It's definitely an expression of their values, their spirit. Everything's related back to it. It's something that's governed by the Mexican government, right? So they have you go through certain measures and make sure that you're upholding certain standards because it's representative of their culture, not just a beverage.
That Mexican government representation, that brings to mind both the appellation that you mentioned on the bottle and then the hologram stickers that every bottle of Xicala and really probably every bottle that's going to be at Mezcal Lauderdale will have. Now, absolutely.
Yes.
It's got the gorgeous logo on there and a QR code, which I find amazing. And are you going to be bringing all three of these to Mezcal Lauderdale?
I will have all three expressions, the Joven, Reposado, and the Añejo at Mezcal Lauderdale. We will be participating in the grand tasting on the 22nd, which is from 1 to 5 p.m. at the Sistrunk Marketplace and Brewery. And we will also be the feature brand for the Mezcal brunch the following day.
Oh, nice.
On Sunday, June 23rd from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the House on the River. So we're really excited. We're going to come up with some specialty drinks for that. And that is a brunch where you'll have some great food and you'll have some great cocktails made with Xicala and have the opportunity to have some sips or shots, if you will, and enjoy our products with some great food and a great atmosphere.
Well, that brings to mind a good question when it comes to a cocktail, which obviously Americans love cocktail culture, but with an expression that does have a signature smokiness, such as mezcal, how do you craft a cocktail to where what makes the mezcal so special, what makes the Xicala so special is able to shine, but still works well with everything else that goes into the cocktail?
Right. Well, I think, you need to work with that smokiness. Obviously a lot of really nice fine dining restaurants will have a mixologist, if you will, or their head bartender is just a fantastic cocktail artist. Uh-huh. And I think the smokiness of the mezcal tends to lend itself to a drink like an old fashioned, where you don't necessarily have to smoke anything. You've got the smokiness inherently in the brand and already there. I've experienced some great old fashions. I've experimented with some Paloma recipes where those juices, really counter that smokiness and balance real well. I personally, looking at like the Xicala website and knowing the influence of jalapenos and different peppers within the culture, I've made jalapeno infused simple syrup. And I think the spiciness goes really well with the smokiness. So I've made like a jalapeno mezcal margarita. I think, it's just amazing. I mean, your creativity could go from there, but it's a pretty versatile spirit. It's a spirit, where everything that I've looked at online, basically it was the spirit that used to have the worm in it. And now it's right there with the high-end mezcals are right there with the high-end tequilas at hundreds of dollars a bottle, and some of them even higher than that, based on the limited amount that might be made. It's a process that's very, very history-driven, right? They love their mezcals in Mexico. I did a sampling with a gentleman in a hotel on Fort Lauderdale Beach, and the head chef was a Mexican gentleman. And he came out and he started taking samples of our product. Uh-huh. And he was very impressed with the Joven. He said he absolutely loved it. It's exactly what he remembers being back in Mexico, and really loved it. And he also loved the fact that we were doing a reposado and an añejo. And to him, it seemed very, very new. To him, a new idea to do a reposado and añejo, because he was so used to just the Joven, the clear spirit as far as a mezcal. So it interested him, but I think he tend to lean, like we said a little bit earlier, like I said, that he was leaning more towards the Joven, the traditional clear spirit that he was used to back in Oaxaca.
That's amazing. I'm definitely excited to try some at the grand tasting. So I will see you there with my particular glass of some kind. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Dave, I have a copita for you.
All right. So like I said, they were fantastic. And I did get a couple pictures of those little animals, which were just phenomenal to see. They are absolutely gorgeous. Next week, we are going to be speaking with another importer, and oh boy, did they have a lot of stuff that they brought to the event. And then the week after that, we will be at the event because we did record audio, and it was an absolute blast. Hopefully I'll have some good pictures for you as well, and just kind of keep it locked in here to hear some more. Now, if you do want to know when those episodes come out, the best thing to do is to go onto our social medias. We're at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram, X, Threads, and Blue Sky. We are at FL Beer Blog on Facebook. On the internet at floridabeerblog.com and floridabeerpodcast.com. And you can always reach out to us at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. We are available on the podcasting app of your choice, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube. You can even listen to us on the smart speaker of your choice. Just ask your smart speaker to say, hey, play the latest episode of the Florida Beer Podcast. And when you do, the first thing that you're going to hear is that we are a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, a collection of amazing podcasts that celebrate the state of Florida, which happens to have been represented in the last 5 Stanley Cup finals, of which we've won 3. Go Panthers. And go Lightning, but right now, go Panthers. For more about them, visit FloridaPodcastNetwork.com. If you do follow us on the podcasting app of your choice, please like us, subscribe to us, and also leave us a nice 5-star review. It really does help us get the information out to everyone. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network, Grand High Poobah, and the voice you hear when you start any episode of the Florida Beer Podcast. That's Jemmy Legagneur. This is David Butler, your host and author. We will be back next week for more Mezcal goodness. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Go Panthers and drink Florida craft.